So here we are. Siman Kuf Lamed Hey, apologize for the late start. Ibeid mafteach shel echad, shel acher, v'tzarech lahachlif min ol, ha'im chayav bidmei hamanul. I think it's hamanul. Yeah, so I lost your key. And as a result of my losing your key, that was your only key. So now you have to change the lock. Do I have to pay for the lock? You had to go and get a locksmith, change the lock. Okay, lakachti, so here's the details. Lakachti mechami et hamafteach shel harechev shelo. I borrowed my father-in-law's car keys. Avad li hamafteach ba'ofen shani chayav l'shalim alav. And I lost the keys in a negligent way, meaning I recognize that I have to pay for a replacement set of keys. Ulam chami omer shezeh haya hamafteach hayichidi shel harechev. But my father-in-law says that was the only key to the car. The only option that he has now is to change the lock on the car. Now, who here is a car mechanic who knows, today the modern cars all have a serial number, and you can go to the dealership and they will manufacture a set of keys. They're very expensive. They could be hundreds of dollars. But I guess this is an older model car. It has a manual key, and it's the only key. And now the only option, according to the mechanic, is to completely change the lock. So am I obligated to pay for it? Okay, so what do you think?
Why would you think you wouldn't have to pay that? If you're a Choshen, and he said he admitted he was negligent.
Right, he was negligent. However, does he have to pay for the accessory damage? The auxiliary damage, I guess you could say. In other words, I'm happy to pay for a replacement key, but the lock is something that is a byproduct of my negligence. It's not a direct result. So maybe that's the argument. Okay, let's see. Hagemara omeret bebava kama Adam shazarak chayfetz merosh hagag al gabi karim shahayu lamata. Okay, the Gemara gives the following case. A man throws jugs or vases that are breakable off of a roof, but he's not worried because he put down pillows on the ground to catch the vases. Now, there. And so he picks it up, walks away with it, and as a result, the vase gets broken. So the Gemara says, is the guy who pulled away the pillow, is he liable or not? So Gemara says the guy who pulled away the pillow is patur. Now, he's patur. That doesn't mean that God is going to hold him completely blameless. He should have maybe checked to see why there was a pillow there or a big cushion, but nonetheless, he's patur from payment. V'nechleku harishonim legabe ha'adam hu hazeh shesilek et karit v'garam bekach l'shvira shakli ha'im nechshav l'mazik bigrama o bigarmi. There's a machlokas in the Rishonim. What his level of causative damage is? There's two terms that the Rishonim use. One is called grama, and the other one is called garmi. They're just different levels of causation. He's definitely not the damager of the kli, right? No one really unilaterally damaged the kli. The guy who threw it off the roof didn't damage it because he thought it was going to land on something soft. And this guy who pulled out the pillow didn't throw the kli. He had nothing to do with the kli. He just prevented it from landing on the pillow. So the question is, so what is his level of causation or his level of connection to the damage? Das Rashi v'Tosfos shehu mazik bigrama v'kaimelan lahalacha grama b'nezikin pater. Rashi and Tosfos say that he's a total grama, which is very removed from the final result. And we paskin that if you are a grama in damages, you're pater. Aval Tosfos heviu as das harif, shedino shuhu mazik bigarmi. But there's another opinion of the Rif, that he has a din of a garmi, which is a more direct causative act. V'rabba shepater sham b'gemara hu l'shitaso shehamazik b'garmi patur, u'lahalacha hamazik et chaver b'garmi chayav. He says, and that's a machlokes, whether garmi is patur or chayav in nezikin. And we paskin not like the Gemara's position. We paskin that if you do something that's more directly causative, that you're going to be liable. Upasa karosh kedeos kedas Rashi v'Tosfos anel the kaven shlo asa davar beguf hadavar hanizog zenikra grama b'nezikin v'lo garmi ugraba b'nezikin pater l'kulei alma. The Rosh paskins like Rashi and Tosfos, who says that you're considered an indirect causer of damage, and therefore you're going to be pater. Avoladas harambam shneim chayovim l'shalim. However, the Rambam paskins that in that case of a guy who throws the jug off the roof and the other guy pulls away the pillow, the Rambam surprisingly paskins that both of them share in the liability. Hazorek v'zeh shahotzi et hakarit sheshneim garmu la'abed mamono shel zeh, because both of them contributed to the breaking of the jug. I wonder if there's a comparable case in secular law.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, the das haravid imlo asamaisa b'chli atzmo eno chayev. The Ravid disagrees with the Rambam. He says if you didn't do an act with the kli itself, you're going to be pater. V'shulchan aruch pasak kedivrei haritha harambam shegarmi chayev afim lo asamaisa b'guf hachefetz. However, the Shulchan Aruch paskins like the Rif in the Rambam that you're liable even if you didn't do anything with the actual object, but you caused it to be damaged. And the Ramah seems to disagree. And he paskins like the Rosh who says you're pater. So we have this major machlokes among the poskim, whether causative damage where you haven't handled the object directly places any liability upon you or not.
Like, give me an example between the difference between a groma.
Itself, but was related to something external to the object. That's
groma would be less.
And a grama is less than that. A grama is indirect, where you do something, and as a result of your something else happens that causes the damage. So that's really the question. This, by the way, I think has applications also. Let's say my friend's dog is annoying me. I think this is an analogous case. And I decide, because he's barking all night, and I decide to do something really nasty. So I take a steak and I coat it with poison and I throw it into my neighbor's backyard. The dog eats it and dies. Okay. Right. I mean, that's very horrible to do, right? But the question is, am I liable for the death of the dog? I think secular law would say that I am liable, but this is considered a case of it's either grama or garmi, because at the end of the day, I didn't force the animal to eat the meat. The animal came of its own volition and ate the meat. So there's the argument to be made that I'm doing a garmi. Now, I'm the direct cause of the animal's death, but the animal had to come and over to the meat and eat it in order for the animal to die.
The animal has free will. The animal does not have free will.
Animal does, we're not, it's not associated with free will. It's associated, right? In other words, even though the animal doesn't have free will and it's just working on instinct, nonetheless, the argument is that there was another action that needed to be performed in order for the animal to die.
I'm just trying to remember that. I think there's a mission that talks about a board that's over 3 to 5 feet that's covered.
Yeah.
If you uncover it, you're responsible thing for whatever falls into that.
Right.
The difference. What's the difference there to what you're talking about here?
It's a great question. We know that one of the major forms of damage is to dig a pit or to uncover a pit that someone else had dug. Or to even, let's say, if it's 9 tefachim deep, to dig it 1 extra tefach
Right.
to be a cause of significant damage. So why is this any different? I think the argument would be is because you've directly impacted the source of damage. You've directly impacted the source of damage.
So in the case of
In the case of the jug,
well, the jug
the guy throws it off the roof.
Right.
So it's his action mixed with gravity that causes it to hit the ground. I'm just merely removing the thing that softens the impact. So it's not as directly connected to a bore, I guess, where right. But you're saying that someone has to walk into it.
Right.
Right. So it's again, it's very subtle. It's very difficult sometimes to see the distinctions, but nonetheless, the poskim do draw that distinction that a bore, even though I didn't tell anyone to step into the bore, it requires an external act of someone or an animal walking into the bore. I guess the argument is, though, that there, because it's a reshus harabim, and it's not my domain, and I don't have a right to dig. It's really a law in the Torah. The Torah gives us the law of bor. How far you apply it, how far you can extrapolate from there, is, I guess, the source of this, of part of the source of this debate. In any event, let's see what he says with this. Ulefizeh, Adam she'ibed mafteach yichidi sha'aya lamechonit. Guy loses the only key to the car. So because of that, the guy can't use the lock anymore. So am I directly the cause of the fact that you can't use the lock, or am I an indirect cause because I lost your key? According to the Ravid and the Rush, I didn't damage the lock. I just lost the key. So because I didn't directly impact the lock, I didn't tamper with the lock itself, I'm going to be potter. Gam kan hu patur kevin shelo asa ma'isa beguf hamani'ul. Because I didn't do anything with the lock itself, I can't be held liable for its lack of usability. Uladas harifa harambam shema. Would hold that you're potter. Why? The hasam b'misaleket akarit haya hezek yashir lechefetz machmat ma'asav. Because in the case of the guy who pulls away the pillow or the cushion, I've caused direct damage to the object through my action. My action is directly linked to the breakage of the kli. The gam hayalo kavana lahazik, and you could argue that I even had the intent to do it. Lo haya nezek yashir leman'ul. But when I lose the key, there was no direct damage to the lock. It's more removed because it's not like a direct result of my action that the lock is now broken. Hamanul nishar shalem kamo shahaya. The lock is still completely intact. Rak she'ein lo mafteach. It's just that I don't have a key. And that's why the guy has to change the lock. And furthermore, because I lost it not intentionally, I didn't do anything malicious, I'm a shogeg. V'das hashachi the garmi potter b'shogeg. And the shach paskins, then when I do a garmi action, and I do it b'shogeg, I'm not liable. No.
That's the guy for the lock. When give them the old lock and say, when you find the key, give it back to me. And they give you credit.
Yeah. But of course, that's not going to really solve the problem, because what if he does find the key? What if he does find it? Why should he be entitled to a credit? He had to hire a mechanic to pull out the lock, to install a new one.
It's appearing it's a machloket as to whether he has to pay for the lock change to be changed or not, because he's saying all he did was lose the key. The fact you only had one key, I'm not really responsible for that.
Could he make that argument
Well, that's what,
that you should have had a spare key?
That's what he's trying to say.
No, we haven't heard that argument yet.
But he's saying that the lock, he didn't damage the lock.
He didn't damage the lock. That's the argument.
So the lock is still whole. So if there was a spare key, then there would be no problem.
Those are your words, Doug. That's not something that he's. No, but I'm saying the argument may be a valid argument. Should there have been an expectation of that anytime you lend out a key, you have a spare? That's not something that he's raised yet, but perhaps maybe that should be part of the mix. I'm not sure. He says, the Makor Baruch continues, he says, V'lechora yesh lodin b'chol zeh, dehayadua deshomer chayev b'grama. 1 second, we also know that a shomer, anytime you've been entrusted to watch over something, even if damage occurs to the object through a grama, you're going to be liable. Let's say a shomer chinam closes the gate but doesn't lock it. So the animal, through just a little bit of a nudge, can open up the gate. So you're still chayev, even though that's a grama. You didn't tell the animal to open the gate. Vim kain. Hagam de l'shitas harash hanezik b'manul nechshav l'grama. So why don't we hold this guy who's lost the key liable for all grama? So I have a simple answer, because you were never a shomer over the lock. You were only a shomer over the key. Anyway. But anyway, let's
the car when you show my over the whole car. Like the key was only the access to use it, but you actually want the car.
but I didn't do anything to the car. I returned the car back completely intact. It was
depends on where it was parked.
Yeah, right. But I didn't do anything.
It's still intact, I agree.
The car, yeah.
But it can't be used.
Yeah. It up. So I say, I only want to pay for one shoe. I don't want to have to pay for both shoes, right? So is that a legitimate argument when you buy shoes by the pair? Okay. Shechayev l'shalem al zuk shalem. Now it should seem obvious that if I damage one shoe out of a pair of shoes, I have to pay for a whole new pair of shoes. Why? Hinal echat lo shave klum ushtei hana'alayim nechshavot kechayfetz echad. He says because one shoe is garnished, right? It's nothing. No one's just going to wear one shoe.
Unless he lost his leg.
Or, or you could say that maybe,
It's like two
You
guys
know,
who
he
both
knows
want
the
to go
manufacturer.
shopping for a shoe, they each take one shoe and they.
right, yeah, yeah. ואם כן, הכנמי יש לחייב על המנעול כיוון שבלי המפתח המנעול לא שווה כלום. So why don't we say the same thing over here? If I lose the key, it's like having two pairs of shoes. It's like having a key and a lock. You can't have a lock without a key and a key without a lock. ושתיהם יחד מהווים חפץ אחד. The two of them jointly make one thing, a security system for the car. So why is this different? He says, but we could make a distinction between a pair of shoes and a key and a lock. He says, because when I damage one shoe, I'm damaging the pair. He says, however, a key is really tafel to the lock. It's really ancillary to the lock. The main part of the security system is the lock. Kishimush bishvilo. Therefore, maybe you could argue that the key is only there to service the lock, and not of intrinsic value unto itself. Putting aside the modern keys with all of the electronics. But it's a very difficult argument to hear. I would much rather assume that losing a key is very much like losing one shoe out of a pair of shoes. Okay, but we're going to have to continue this discussion in order to see where he's going with this. So let us go on. He says, where did I leave off? Okay. So therefore, he says, it could be that you have this machlokes, where according to the Ravid and the Rush, because you didn't do anything to the actual lock itself, you're going to be pater. And according to the Rif and the Rambam, you're going to be liable. It's machlokes rishonim. The gam ladas Ravid v'harash, im kishaba liftoch et hamanul lo noha keroi, the shiber et hamavteach banan bamanul. And it would turn out, using this analysis, that what if, instead of losing the key, I stuck the key in the lock, and because I jiggered it the wrong way, it broke in the lock. So he says, in that case, chayev l'shalim demei kol hamanul me'achar ba'asa ma'isa beguf hamanul. Then I would have to replace the whole lock and key, because I've done damage to the actual lock. Now, I'm not sure whether that's really true.
You can take it out.
You can get a locksmith probably to remove the piece of the key. Now we get to Doug's issue. The cholzeh kishahachatan yadash zeu hamafteach hayachid sheyesh lechamiv l'rechev shelo. All of the aforementioned is only when the son-in-law knew that this was his father-in-law's only key. Aval im hechatan lo yadash zeh mafteach hayachid. But let's say he didn't know that it was the only key, because most people keep a spare, right? So yesh mak. Cases of loss, and you didn't.
You just
So-
need to replace the key, not the lock.
Yeah, in that, if the son-in-law didn't know. So we'll look at that Shulchan Aruch and we'll see the comparison. We'll discuss it in Mirz Hashem tomorrow. Okay, have a great day, everybody.